Good evening again, and welcome everyone back to FractalU.com. And we're so happy that we have with us Tufan Guven this evening, who from Turkey. He's doing active biophoton research and biofeedback work, teaching about fractal field science, writing for science magazines in Turkish on longitudinal waves in DNA and alternative science. And he works with biofeedback with his brother in California. Tufan is really helping us with the whole fractal curriculum, and we're delighted that he's taken the time to put together a wonderful presentation, which is introductory on how to think about fractal field science in visual and introductory terms. It's always so helpful to have someone else to put it into new and fresh language. I'm delighted. And Tufan was up in Prague there, and I was unable to meet him, but I'm glad we're meeting here. It's all good and all fun. And just a quick little note about upcoming at FractalU.com. In 1 week from today, we will have Graham Forscutt presenting highly visual unified fractal field science also. And then in 2 weeks, we have Alan Egan, or James Egan, who is an expert on, again, Shakespeare and John Dee. And then on March 19th, we have a global healing meditation with the Therify operators around the world, plasma science, and Therify operators feedback. So lots of fun coming up at FractalU.com. But right now, without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Tufan Guven, who will also give us some intro about his background. So Tufan, welcome, and thank you for speaking with us.
Thank you, Dan. Glad to be on. First, I would like to thank Dan for his contributions to fractal field science and organizing the Fractal University and gathering all the valuable teachers to share this beautiful information. I would also like to express my gratitude to Dan for allowing me to present this class tonight. First, let me give you a little bit of my background. My background is in finance sector, focused on hedge fund management. That was until 2010. Later on, I started expanding my research on the occult and esoteric, which led me to organizing and giving seminars on topics like fractal field science and spiritual development. I'm a Biontologist, which means a certified practitioner of a specific biophoton therapy. I'll talk about it later tonight in relation with the science presented here. I am a writer in multiple magazines and platforms, for the time being only in Turkish, unfortunately. And this is pretty much what I do. While I was doing my research on fractal field science, I have realized that a certain level of scientific and electrical engineering language is necessary to constitute the foundation of fractal field science. At the same time, I was looking for ways to explain some of the basic concepts in a way that a person who is not an engineer can understand this as well. So I decided to present the science here relatively in an easier way for beginners. So let's start with going over the outline of today's presentation. Today we will be talking about what is fractality and golden ratio, what is a bioactive field, how do we measure the life force, symmetry differences in distribution versus isolation of charge fields, qualities of the universal energy, physics of waves and forces, physics of phase conjugation, significance of platonic solids in compressional fields, bioactive and fractal field applications for health. So we'll first start with the basic definition of fractal, what is a fractal, and then we will continue with some pictures. So a fractal is a geometric pattern that is repeated at every scale. It's coming from the Latin word fractus, which means broken or fractured. So the term fractal was first used by mathematician Benoit Mandelbrot to extend the concept of theoretical fractional dimensions to geometric patterns in nature in 1975. And the picture behind is from the famous Mandelbrot set, which we will be talking about later tonight. And so when we look at the fractal patterns, like there are two specific principles or oops,
Yeah, I muted that mic. Go ahead, please. Go ahead.
All right, no problem. So yeah, there are specific two qualities of any fractal pattern. So the first one is self-similarity, and the second one is repetition. So a fractal pattern has to be self-similar and repetitive. So like when we look at the peacock, the wings of the peacock, and let's say leaves to the cauliflower, to the snowflake here, or the lightning, we will see that there is self-similarity and repetition. Let's focus on the leaf picture in the middle here, the yellow leaf. Now we see that there are these patterns which look like each other. They are not 100% identical, because in nature nothing is 100% identical, but only a similarity is enough for them. So they are similar and there is repetition. There are multiple of them. And when we zoom in, we will continue to see the repetition there. So this is the same for other fractal fields. It has to be self-similar and repetitive.
We could also play with words like self-embedding and scale
Yes.
invariant are synonyms there, perhaps.
Thank you. So now I would like to give you some examples starting from the micro level to the macro level. So, oops. Yes. When we look at the quantum field, the interactions of waves emitted by the electrons here, we see the fractal patterns here. They are similar to each other and they are repetitive. And this project was done by the Yazdani group in Princeton University. And this one is a Lichtenberg lightning. So this one is formed by high voltage dielectric breakdown in a plexiglass. These forms are called dendritic forms. These are also called branching. So wherever we zoom in this specific picture, we will continue to see this branching until the molecular level. And we also see these patterns in nature. Now I will continue to give you some examples from the plant life. These are, again, fractal plants, all self-similar, and there is repetition. And cauliflower, yes.
It's fun to think that perfect branching came to be the word Xi'an, which is where the word science comes from. And perfect branching is also behind the word divine, which is, it points to the spiritual. So perfect branching is a powerful electrical and spiritual metaphor. It's lots of fun.
Beautiful. Now, cauliflower is one of the examples that I love giving because it gives these qualities perfectly in your face. So we see this basic cone shape in the cauliflower. It's like a vortex. It's like a cone. And wherever you focus on this specific plant, you will see this cone shape repeating itself. For example, we focus on the side. Now we will see the same cones repeating. And on those smaller scale cones, we focus and we see even much smaller cones. So there's this perfect self-similarity and repetition. Some other examples from plant life.
So beautiful.
Beautiful flowers.
Inspiring.
So this is another example to the dendritic forms or branching. Now we see that there is this main trunk of the tree, and then we see the branches. It's getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Another example from bottom up, dendritic forms. And we can see them in nature, like in rivers. We see this main river and the smaller arms of the river getting smaller and smaller. And we can observe them. These pictures are taken by the satellite. Mountains, dendritic forms, fractal mountains.
Gorgeous.
And now I would like to continue giving some examples from the architecture. Starting from India, this is the Virupaksha temple. And we can see the patterns, self-similar and repetitive patterns here. This one is the Khajuraho temple in India. And I was able to find the plans of this architecture in Google. And here is on the left upper corner, in the figure A, we see this main model here. This is the main geometry. And in this architecture, they took this main model and they applied it in smaller scales, as you can see in B. And they repeated this action on the version C here in more smaller scales, which gave us a fractal architecture here.
There's lots of articles about fractality in African architecture, which seems to be global. And it's
Yes.
also about charge compression, enabling the sacred. So it's a beautiful thing to study with electrical metaphor.
That's what I was just going to say, the fractal architecture in Africa. This is one of the examples. This one is from Cameroon, Africa, the Mokulek settlement. We can see the fractal living spaces. This one is the Kitwe community in Zambia. These are hexagonal layouts we can see. Another one from Logombirni, Cameroon, Africa.
Cameroon, nice. Nice.
And this one is the Baila settlement. This picture was taken before 1944, before the term fractal got modernized. So in the next slide, I will be giving you the plans of the settlement, and I would like to talk about it. So this is the Baila settlement, the floor plans. Now, when we look at here, we can see the perfect fractal architecture. Like on the bottom picture on the left, we see this main geometry is repeated in smaller scales in the middle here. We can see them. And even one more level, it's even more in smaller scales. They installed the same geometry. So exact same design on 3 different levels. And Daminter also talks about it in the fractal architecture videos, like on how to create the perfect fractal fields, architecture, buildings. Of course, there are a lot of principles that needs to be applied, like first mapping the magnetic fields of the landscape, and then working on the plans which are based on golden ratio, and then using the organic material and so on. But I just want to give some basic examples right now, because we don't have a lot of time for the deep science here. Now all these informations, we can see them in Ron Eglash's YouTube video. He has beautifully presented all the fractal designs in Africa. You can search it on YouTube if you are interested in fractal architecture. He has laid out the details here. And because I was raised in Turkey, I was always familiar with the fractal geometric patterns when we go to any sacred site. And this is a very nice report which was done in the University of Technology in Malaysia. You can find the source here. And in this chart, we can see the evolution of Islamic geometric patterns. Now, I'm going to zoom in to the top side of this presentation here, because there's a timeline starting from the 600s to the 1800s. So we can see during like what kind of geometries arise during which dynasty. Let's see. I don't know if it's clear or not.
It's working great.
Yes. So for example, the first three sets of geometries or tiles were brought by the Abbasid Caliphate, and then they were being used in multiple sacred sites. And when we look at the middle group here, these were developed by the Seljuks. These are a little more complex geometries than the first ones. And when we go down further, the last three sets of geometries, which are a bit more complex, were developed by the Ottoman Empire. And
yeah, you can see the years on there, Terry. Yes, she asked about what year that was. It shows on there.
Yeah, let me zoom in again to the timeline
you can see
here.
the years on there.
Yeah, the Ottoman Empire starts around the late 13th century, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to share the link to this report, the link of this report with you here to the chat box, and you'll be able to download it if you want to. Here it is.
And Tufan is also going to make the entire PDF available through FractalU here shortly too.
Yes, no problem. And so I would like to give you an example of this first installation of the geometric patterns. Of course, I cannot go over each one of them. It would take a lot of time, but I would like to give you the first example here. When we look at these set of patterns here, which were developed by the Abbasi Caliphate, this one is from Tunisia, and we can see the same geometries and patterns here. So this is the Great Mosque of Kairouan. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correct. This is from the year 670. And of course, there are lots of examples of fractal geometries in architecture, especially in the Islamic architecture. These are just to point a few.
Beautiful.
And this one is the famous mosque in Iran, Nasir al-Mulk Mosque, I guess.
Wow. Gorgeous.
Now I would like to continue with the human body. The human body, we have a lot of dendritic patterns. Starting from the left, we see the lymphatic system. We see the branching in the lymphatic system, and we have the blood circulation, and then we have the lungs, and then we have the neurons in the brain, and the connection between the neurons. Now, there's something interesting with the neurons system. In Brandeis University, they made a research in Brandeis University to lay out the connections between the neurons and the universal mass in a bigger scale. And you can see in the pictures on the right, this is the picture of the universe in a bigger scale. And on the left, this is the connection of the neurons. And the researchers have found some similarities between the two subjects. And then they started discussing whether this is a coincidence or there is really something to it. And when further studies were done by different independent researchers, they all came to the same conclusion that there were great similarities among the neurons, the connections of the neurons, and the universe. So there is this question comes up. Can the universe be part of a larger mind? Or can it be that we might be creating the universe in our minds?
That's rich.
Now, this subject has been touched upon many different esoteric and mystic traditions, and this fractality of the mind and the universe. And I would like to give you some examples on these traditions, starting with the Sufism. So in Sufism, there is a concept of the unity of being, which encourages people to look for God inside oneself and perceive the whole universe, including oneself, as the reflection of God. According to this philosophy, the universe on the macro level is a holographic model whose source is the energy, just like the neurons in the brain. On a cosmic scale, from the fractal and holographic universe perspective, this means that each part of the world contains the whole of the universe as it's hidden inside each part. Now, Rumi has this famous saying, the purpose of the mind is to see the divine essence and to reach his unity. And Yunus Emre says, knowledge means to know yourself. Now, isn't this very similar to what we were talking about in the previous slides? In Sufism, the divine secret is the realization of the unity of the God, human, and the universe. The creator and the creation and everything is actually one. It has no beginning and no end. The whole universe and the human being is God's representation in different forms. The universe and the human being is a perception that reflects God's similarity. So here we can clearly see the definition of the fractal fields among the micro level and the macro level. Because it says that the creator has the creation and the creation has the creator in it. And we see the same philosophy in different esoteric traditions like Hermetism. In the Emerald Tablets, it is said that that which is below corresponds to that which is above, and that which is above corresponds to that which is below, to accomplish the miracles of the one thing, as above, so below. So here we can also clearly see the definition of a fractal reality, a fractal matrix, so to speak. Now there is this beautiful book I would like to offer you all, the Holographic Universe, which was written by Michael Talbot in 1991. 1 year before he passed away. And in this book, he talks about the nature of the reality and explains his theory of the universe as one giant hologram. So I found reading this book fascinating somewhere around, I think, 10 years ago. And
it's worth mentioning that the principle of the hologram that allows each part of the hologram to be represented by the whole electrically resolves to the problem of perfect compression, which is also the problem fractality solves. So holography implies fractality of perfect compression, so one can contain the all.
Yes,
beautiful.
And I think that this is one of the first books that the modern world was introduced with the holographic concepts and the holographic perception and reality, as far as I know.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Now I would like to talk about some of the researchers and scientists who have contributed to fractal field science. Of course, we don't have time to go over each one of the personalities, but I would like to point out a couple of them, starting with Buckminster Fuller. Fuller was an American architect, systems theorist, author, designer, and inventor, and he is very famous for his geodesic dome structure, which allows safety and energy efficiency optimization. And let's see a couple of examples from his this one is Fuller's house, his own house. And we can see in those buildings the fractal fields, repetitive and self-similar. This one is on a bigger scale, the Montreal Biosphere in 1967. This is another one. And Benoit Mandelbrot was a Polish-born mathematician. He is recognized for his contribution to the field of fractal geometry, which includes coining the word fractal, as well as developing the theory of roughness and self-similarity in nature. While working at IBM, he developed computer graphics to create and display fractal geometric images, leading to his discovering the Mandelbrot set in 1979. So, Mandelbrot discovered the formula of fractal fields or fractality while he was working at IBM. And one day, IBM started having a problem in their internal communication lines, I believe. And they approached him to ask for help. And then Mandelbrot started researching on the problem. And he started analyzing the errors on the internal communication lines. And while he was researching on the errors, he realized that there was something different, something interesting in the errors. When he zoomed in to the error on the lines, on the computer simulation, he realized that same patterns were repeating itself in much smaller scales. This was not something that he was used to, and this error was something looking like this. You see the counter set at the top, and the error was like that. Wherever you zoomed in, you could see the same pattern repeating itself, like in doubles. I think in Eastern traditions, they also call this counter set as the monster, because you cannot catch it. You cannot find its end. It just continues until forever. Even though the counter set was first drawn in 1883, Mandelbrot was the first mathematician who wrote the formula, as far as I know. And another example of fractal geometry is this Hilbert curve. That one also continues until forever. And another basic examples of fractal geometries here. This is the Sierpinski fractal. It starts with a basic 3 lines, and you continue to draw additional 3 lines at the ends. And when you continue to do that, you see this triangle here. And at the bottom, this is the co-star. You start with a triangle, and you draw triangles on each sides, and you continue to do this, and you reach to the co-star. Now, this one is the famous Mandelbrot set. Normally, I would show you a video of the Mandelbrot set, fractal field, but I think our bandwidth might get some problems if I do that. So I'm not going to do that. But if you search YouTube, type in Mandelbrot set, and I'm sure you'll get hundreds of different computer animations showing the fractal Mandelbrot set. So the difference between computer simulated fractal fields and natural fractal fields is that in nature, you see this repetition until a certain level. Like, for example, it doesn't go beyond the molecular level, as far as I know. But in the computer programming, you can do this until forever, or you can zoom in until forever. It has no ending. So if you, like, as I said, you can find this on YouTube. You can watch a couple of them because it continues until forever. I advise not to do it at home when you're alone. Just kidding.
You could fall into the rabbit hole.
Right. Also, Nassim Haramein has contributed to the understanding of the fractal fields in the nature, and he has pointed out some golden ratio relations among some important masses. But while my research on the fractal field science, I have realized that the real revolution in the fractal field science came out through Dan Winter. So Dan has developed the science based on golden mean ratio perfected fractal phase conjugation to solve all the problems in our society, such as urban design, alchemy, isotope transition, fusion, perfect compression, mindfulness, and bliss experience. With his mathematics team, including Martin Jones, was the first to prove the wave equations showing golden ratio solves the problem of maximum constructive wave interference, compression, and phase conjugation. Dan has also proved that hydrogen radii are exact golden ratio phase conjugate multiples of Planck, fitting perfectly to the universal frequency caduceus, which is exactly golden ratio exponents of Planck length and time, origin of all biologic negentropy. So we will be explaining some of the concepts that I have written here, like phase conjugation. But before doing that, maybe we can first look at the basic definitions and the qualities of golden ratio. So this golden ratio number is one of the what do they call it? Irrational numbers, which continues until forever. It starts with 1.618. And we all know a basic definition of what golden ratio is. It's something like this. Golden ratio is the basic ratio which was used in the creation of human being and nature on Earth. But with the advancement of the sciences and the technology, now we understand that we have to expand this definition. And I would like to suggest a better definition of golden ratio, which is the fundamental ratio in fractal fields, which is the electric origin, cause of mechanism of all centripetal and self-organizing forces, including and especially gravity, life force, perception, bliss, enlightenment, end of addiction, alphabet and symbol and color. Now this is from goldenmean.info, Dan Winter's website. Like all the points here are quite deep in discussion, so we will talk about it later, but I'll first want to continue with the history of the golden ratio. So Egyptians have used the golden ratio in the design of the Great Pyramids. Maybe it was used before, but we don't know that, so we could only see some of the structures who could still survive today. Greeks have also used the golden ratio in the design of the Parthenon. Plato, in his views on natural science and cosmology, presented in his Timaeus, considered the golden section to be the most binding of all mathematical relationships and the key to the physics of the cosmos. Now, I would like to read this again. So, Plato considered the golden section to be the most binding of all mathematical relationships and the key to the physics of the cosmos. I think this is quite strong. Afterwards, right afterwards, Euclid, in his book Elements, he referred to dividing a line at the 0.618 point as dividing a line in the extreme and mean ratio. Now, this gave rise to the use of the term mean in the golden mean. He also linked it to the construction of a pentagram. Now, this one is also very interesting because today, whichever school we go to or wherever we go, and we ask any student or anybody to divide a stick into two. Let's say we have a stick with a specific length, and we ask them to divide this into two. They will try to divide it from the middle point. But what Euclid suggests is that if we divide this from the 0.618 point, which is slightly off the middle, that will be the extreme and mean ratio. So we can clearly understand that the understanding of the mathematics and the geometry was much different than our current time. So Leonardo Fibonacci discovered the unusual properties of the numerical series that now bears his name. the Fibonacci sequence. We will talk about it. And Leonardo da Vinci provided illustrations using the golden mean extensively for a dissertation published by Luca Pacioli in 1509 entitled The Divine Proportion. Well, in this book, Leonardo da Vinci also presented some artwork about the platonic solids and the very famous Vitruvian Man. Johannes Kepler, the discoverer of the elliptical nature of the orbits of the planets around the sun, also made mention of the divine proportion, saying this about it. Geometry has two great treasures. One is the theorem of Pythagoras, the other the division of a line into extreme and mean ratio. The first we may compare to a measure of gold. The second we may name a precious jewel. Now, very simply, let's see how golden mean ratio is calculated. Let's say we have a stick and this stick's length is 1 unit. As Euclid suggested, if we cut this stick into two from the 0.618 point, which is here, now we would get 2 sticks. And the 2 sticks ratio to each other would be equal to 1.618. So on the next slide, we will see the 2 sticks here. We see them here. And when we divide 0.382 to 0.618, we get 1.618, which gives us the golden ratio. But the numbers doesn't need to focus on specific numbers like 0.618. We can have other set of numbers, something like this. Let's say we have 7 and 4.3. This can also give us the golden ratio, as long as the proportions allow us. Let's see another example. Let's say we have 7 units and 5 units. And 5 divided by 7 would equal to 1.4. And is there golden ratio? No. This is a very basic example about calculating the golden ratio. Now let's look at another example here. We have a set of numbers, set of sticks, let's say 1, 2, 4, and 8. Now, in order to understand if there is a golden ratio relationship among these numbers, we have to either divide them to each other. Let's try it. Let's divide 8 by 4, which would equal to 2. It is not 1.618, so there is no golden ratio here. 4 divided by 2 would also equal to 2. This is not 1.618, so there is no golden ratio. Or we could also use this method. Let's multiply any of the numbers here with 1.618. If the result gives us the following number, then it is golden ratio. If not, then it is not golden ratio. So there is no golden ratio in this set of numbers. I'm sorry. Let's look at another example here. We have another set of numbers, starting with 0.382, 0.618, 1, 1.618, 2.618, 4.235. So let's apply the same principles here. Let's multiply them with 1.618. When you multiply 382 with 1.618, you would get 0.618. This is golden ratio. And when you multiply 0.618 with 1.618, you would get 1. And do the same thing, you would get 1.618. And it continues like that. So there is a golden ratio relationship in this set of numbers. So golden mean ratio is the only number in the universe which have both arithmetic mean and geometric mean. So when we say arithmetic mean, if you add the first number to the second number, you will get the third number. Do the same with the second number and the third number, you would get the fourth number. And it continues the same. So this is called arithmetic mean. And geometric mean is when you multiply any of the numbers here with golden mean ratio, which is 1.618, you would get the next number. So this is called adding and multiplying constructively. And we will be seeing this science, this mathematics here in concepts like phase conjugation and constructive wave interference. So this is a very basic picture here, which we will be talking about it in later sciences. We see that the waves interfere with each other at specific levels, which give us the golden mean ratio. As we said, golden mean ratio is the only ratio which has arithmetic and geometric mean. Because of that, only golden ratio allows adding and multiplying constructively. Now, this is also called, as I said, constructive wave interference. I will get back to this slide later on tonight. Now, let's continue with the star symbol here. The star symbol, or the pentagon inside, is one of the most sacred symbols in history. And the star symbol has perfect golden mean ratio in every part. Let's focus on the red line here and divide it to the yellow line, the distance of the yellow line. And that would give us 1.618. And we do the same with the yellow line and the blue line here. The result is 1.618. And then divide the blue line with the pink line here. It would give us 1.618. And furthermore, if we decide to draw another star in the pentagon here, something like this, this would allow us to track the golden ratio going through the wormhole. So this is like an implosive field where the golden ratio repeats itself until infinity.
It's beautiful that you summarize this way, Tufan. And I just wanted to say that, you know, it was shocking to me when we realized that all the geometry people knew that golden ratio was a solution to arithmetic and geometric progression. But none of the electrical people or physics had come to the conclusion that it in fact then also explained constructive interference and therefore solution to compression. That concept is not in the conventional physics literature. It was our work that first pointed out that constructive compression and constructive wave interference is the problem golden ratio solved. And no one had simply looked at that before, which was actually shocking because it's the solution to so many problems. So again, I'm delighted to hear you reviewing it here. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. It sounds like it's one of the hidden secrets, but really? It's nice that this information is coming out now.
Yes, and it's specifically the solution to implosion, which is therefore negentropy. This is a powerful thing. It's wonderful to hear this expressed in other terms. Please go ahead.
Yes. So I'd like to show how to draw a golden mean ratio spiral with a star. So we start with the top corner here and continue drawing the spiral. We pass the second edge, and then we go over the third edge, and then the fourth edge, and then the next interference point, and continue the spiral, and we will have the golden mean ratio spiral through a star. And we can also draw that by a golden ratio rectangle. Now, in order to have a golden ratio rectangle, we need to have the specific ratios. Let's say we have 1 unit here and This side has to be 1.618 in order to have the golden ratio. And as Euclid suggested, we would need to cut this rectangle into two from the mean and extreme ratio, which is somewhere like this. So when we cut this golden ratio rectangle from the mean ratio, from the golden ratio point, we get one perfect square and another perfect golden ratio rectangle. Now this is the second ratio, golden ratio rectangle that we have. The first one is the bigger scale, and the second one is the smaller scale. And the fun part is that we can continue doing this until forever. So we would need to apply the same principle to this rectangle here. Cut it in the mean ratio, and then we would get another perfect square and another golden ratio rectangle, something like this. So we would have perfect squares continuing like this. And then if we apply the quarters of the spiral to each square, we would get something like this. Now the spiral follows the squares, as you can see, and goes with the golden ratio. Now, I'm sure there are other ways of drawing a golden ratio spiral with other geometries, but this is one of the easiest ways that I find. And we see these spiral patterns in the universe in many different scales, from micro to macro. Like in the galactic scale, we see them on hurricanes. And there's this beautiful relationship between the Earth and the Venus. Every 8 years, the orbits of the Earth and Venus, they create that perfect star, or the perfect rose. Now, there's a very nice video of that on YouTube. I'm not going to show it to you, but I'll just post the link here to the chat box, so you can watch it if you want. It's a short video how Earth and Venus create this beautiful star in 8 years, every 8 years. And
the Earth and Venus orbit duration are exactly exact integer exponent golden ratio times Planck time as well.
yes. Now, Kepler first mentioned about the platonic solid relationship with the in the solar system. But if you check the website of Spira Solaris, you will see in great detail the golden ratio and Fibonacci connection of the orbits of the planets in the solar system. It's a great work done. spirasolaris.ca, and let me write it here as well.
And it's so interesting that it's a very easy step of logic to see that if golden ratio perfect embedding is the geometry of orbital nestings, that is therefore how gravity is stabilized.
Right.
Perfect compression.
So we can see the Fibonacci sequence here. We will talk about it more, the Fibonacci sequence, but let me just show you because we have the slide now. 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34. Now we see the golden mean ratio scales in our body, in our arms, our hands, and we also find them on our face, but not everyone has the golden mean ratio proportions. But the more your proportions are close to golden ratio, the more attractive you are, as seen in figure A. And this is the heart tuner application of Dan Winter. And it has been, you can see that the brain waves are being analyzed through EEG, and the more your brain waves are closer to golden mean ratio between your alpha frequencies and beta frequencies, you get more into the bliss state. I'm sure Dan has more to say about this.
Well, soon we'll have that whole thing working on iPhone, iPad, flameinmind.com. It's really exciting. It's working now. We're just testing. It's great.
Perfect. So we also have golden mean ratio in our brainwaves. That's what I wanted to point out. And some of the interesting facts, golden ratio discovered in the uterus. Now, Belgian gynecologist measures reproductive organs of 5,000 women and finds that the most fertile have mathematically perfect dimensions. So what this means is that they have measured the distances between the ovaries and the length of the uterus, and the comparison, as it gets close to the golden ratio, the fertility also increases. That's an interesting fact. And we also see golden ratio in our DNA. Whichever perspective you look from, you will see the golden mean ratio. The picture on the right is from goldenmean.info. And because of this function of the DNA, the structure of the DNA, it's able to gather the implosive fields, so to speak. Now, we know that Dan Winter has proved that hydrogen radii are exact golden ratio phase conjugate multiples of Planck, fitting perfectly to the universal frequency caduceus, which is exactly golden ratio exponents of Planck length time, origin of all biologic negentropy. Here we see that the electron shells of the hydrogen atom has perfect golden ratio dynamics in between each other. So this means that the nucleus of the hydrogen is fractal to its electron shell. Is that right, Dan?
Well, there's a lot more to that, because the proton geometries from the work of Moon are also shown to be platonic nesting icosahedrodeca. And here we're seeing that the electron geometries are self-similar. So the fact that the hydrogen is so fractal is part of why it's so involved in all the fusion chemistry. For example, Rossi, monoatomic hydrogen is key to lots of the fusion, over unity physics, because of precisely its fractality, which I was able to document.
Perfect. When we look at the ancient structures, as said before, the Greeks are thought by some to have based the design of the Parthenon on this beautiful proportion. And the golden ratio in historical artifacts, when we look at the Artemis, Isis, or Diana, this is being presented in Ephesus Museum in Turkey right now, we see the golden mean ratio proportions. And when we look at the heads of Zeus or Enlil or the Selçuk head, we see the same proportions done. And more examples from the heads of statues in Nemrut, Turkey, and other examples. Actually, there are like tons of examples of artifacts with the same geometries. Another interesting fact is that when we look at the place of Mecca, Kaaba, it is situated in the perfect golden ratio destination on Earth, like one of the perfect destinations. When you find Kaaba, let's say on Google Earth, and with a basic calculation function, you can calculate the distance between Kaaba and the North Pole, and write that down either in kilometers or miles, and measure the distance between Kaaba and the South Pole. And you will see that when you divide these two distances into each other, you will get 1.618. So I did that. It works. So this is one of the interesting facts. Of course, Kaaba is one of the sacred lands long ago, before Islamic tradition. So somebody knew where to place the sacred land. So in art, we see golden ratio. This is Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper. And this one is also Leonardo da Vinci Annunciation. Now, I have highlighted in yellow the golden ratio proportions here, you can see. So it's very fascinating to see how these proportions line up with specific, for example, let's say this one lines up with the marble here. And this one lines up with the end of the garden. And this one vertically lines up with the corner of the wall. And this one lines up with the tree. And on the left, we see Archangel Gabriel. Looks like pointing something, huh? And very interestingly, he is, the Archangel Gabriel is pointing the golden ratio as if that ratio is being sent towards the left hand of Mary. So we can find other examples. This one is Katsushika Hokusai, the great wave of Kanagawa, and we can see the golden ratio spiral here, and we can see the fractal principles. We see this main wave, and there are even smaller waves on the edge of the waves here drawn. And we see the golden mean ratio in different logos here. These are just to name a few. So it's very interesting to see how the logos, almost all of them, are based on golden ratio. And let's talk about the Fibonacci series now. Now, Fibonacci series are a way of nature mimicking the golden ratio, because we know that golden ratio is a number, is an irrational number. It's like 1.618. The nature, like if, let's say, we have a tree and the tree needs to give a branch. Now, it cannot give 1.618 branch. It can either give 1 or 0 or 2 or 3. So it cannot give point values. So the nature needs to follow the whole numbers. So it goes like 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. And when you add any number to its neighbor, you would get the following number. So 1.1, 2, 1.2, 3, 2 plus 3, 5. You can see it on the left screen here. And the interesting thing is that as you go through the Fibonacci numbers, Fibonacci sequence, it perfects itself towards the golden mean ratio. Now, how does it do it? When we divide the numbers that I presented in the previous slide to each other, let's say 1 divided by 1 is 1. 2 divided by 1 is 2. And then the next one, 3 divided by 2 is 1.5. And the next one, 5 divided by 3 is something like 1.666, I guess. And I think 8 divided by 13 is 1.6. And it goes like this. As you can see, it kind of perfects itself towards the golden ratio. And when we look at the branching patterns, we see, let's say this main trunk is 1, and we see 2 branches, 1, 2, and the next number is 3, 1, 2, and 3. The next number is 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and it continues like this. When we look at the leaves, it follows the same principle. 1, 1, 2, 3 in this level, 5, and 8 leaves. And when we look at the plants, the number of petals also follow the same principle here. 1 petals, 2 petals, 3 petals, 5, 8, 13, 21, and 34. Now this picture is taken from the Scientasia website. If you want to check it, you can check it. Now, we have seen golden ratio and Fibonacci sequence in nature, in the micro level, in the macro level, it's everywhere. And this is Dan Winter's universal frequency caduceus, which gives you the golden ratio exponents of Planck length and time. So first of all, what is Planck length and time? Let's start with that. Planck length and time is the smallest scale that you can go to in the universe. Like, you cannot divide Planck length and time into two. It's like the fabric of time, the smallest tiny space. And once you start multiplying Planck length and time with 1.618, you continue to reach some fundamental masses like 3 exact hydrogen radii, ADP, ATP, photosynthesis, low frequency HRV Mayer wave frequencies, Venus and Earth years, as we saw before, precession of the equinox, and galactic year. So this is the work of Dan Winter. And so as I said, we start from the Planck length and time, and we don't need to multiply anything with 2, 3, or 5. We just need to stick to 1.618 golden ratio, and that's enough. What about the other side of the Planck length and time? So Professor Caio, I hope I'm pronouncing it right.
Raymond Chow.
Chow has become well known in the field of quantum optics due to several important experiments. Based on former experiments carried out by Günter Nintz in 1992, he measured the quantum tunneling time, which was found to be between 1.5 and 1.7 times the speed of light. And we know that golden ratio is 1.618, so it fits perfectly between 1.5 and 1.6. So this definition fits on the other side of the Planck length and time, which gives us a speed faster than light.
Because a theory of gravity suggests that when the charge wavefront goes to the 0 point, the Planck length, it's accelerated by golden ratio multiples times the speed of light. So the fact, if this is right, this is evidence that the golden ratio theory of gravity is correct, that you actually measure speeds faster than light as golden ratio multiples of the speed of light. So Raymond Chow is helping us prove our theory of gravity, we believe.
Perfect. Now, I would like to take a moment and make this presentation a little fun. So I want all of you to observe these two fractal geometries. Take a moment and try to observe how you feel about these two. And you can please feel free to write your comments on the chat box, and then we can discuss how you feel about them, why you feel about them. This is not a test, but this is just a fun way of maybe discussing some things and get you interactive to the presentation. So let's look at these figures just for 30 seconds or 40 seconds, and let's see how you feel about them. Please feel free to write your comments.
If I may, Tufan, just 1 second to try to address Terry's question there. A real quickie here. Terry Burns is saying, what is the simplest way to explain Planck length and time to in basic terms? And one way to talk about it is to say Planck is the unit of length and time into which every wave physics has ever measured. It divides evenly. So it's the musical key signature of every wave that physics has ever measured in length and time. It's another way of talking about the musical key signature of the universe. Just a sort of another way of talking about it.
Thank you.
I didn't mean to interrupt your lovely experiment. Go ahead, please. I see the square wave as more destructive and the pent as more constructive, but maybe I'm prejudiced.
I think you are quite right. So I think most of the comments prefer the right picture, which is a pentagon.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. Well, the main difference between two geometries is that one of them carries perfect golden mean ratio and the other one carries exactly the opposite.
Powers of 2. Octaves.
So when we mean the opposite, what do we mean? Now, in the following 4 slides, I will try to explain the main differences between the two understanding here, golden ratio and the opposite, by giving you some examples, and then we will come back to this slide and talk about it again. So this leads us to the field of a bioactive field, which is a space which supports life, where charge distribution efficiency is perfected, in other way.
Exactly.
Yes. And now there's an interesting test that I think Dan did it. Now, this test shows the interference patterns of the waves. Now you see this white line here. Now the white line divides the two fields. On the above, there is the distributing charge field, and at the bottom there's the storing charge. And they have analyzed the maximum point where distribution efficiency is maximized, which is 1.618, and the maximum point where storing charge or charge isolation was maximized, exactly the multiples of 2 or octave. So what does this tell us? This tells us that 1.618 is a maximum constructive bioactive charge distribution point, whereas the multiples of 2 isn't seen in this chart, or octave is a maximum destructive or charge isolation place. So I would like to also give examples of some other tests. So this is also a test of measuring the life force and the energy fields. I think which was done in Poland and France, I believe. And,
yes, Poland.
Right. In this test, different food were tested. They would take one example from a perfect fractal place and another one exactly the opposite, and they would compare the energy levels of the food, and they realized that the food which was in the fractal place has a higher energy level than the other ones. And another example is Dr. Krotkov's GDV device. This is gas discharge visualization. You can measure the space with this device, if this space has a higher charge efficiency or a lower. So what they have experimented is that they measured the space next to a sacred tree or a fractal field, and then compared the measurements with other tests which were done in places with full of metals or opposite the fractal. So in the pictures on the left, we can see that these were tested, measured in the places where there were full of metals, where the place was opposite the fractal. And these results were measured next to the fractal spaces. And some other examples of measurements were done by creating the bioactive fractal fields. These are the seeds were being measured. The growth effect was observed, and they could see that in fractal fields, the seeds could grow much faster. And with those tests, we can now identify what kind of materials are most fractal, life-serving, supporting life energies, and what kind of materials are least fractal. This is a diagram from goldenmean.info. And when you look at the metals, we can see that gold, palladium, platinum, silver are most fractal, and steel and aluminum are on the opposite side, least fractal, poisonous to life. When we look at the fabric, for example, we can see that hemp, silk, cotton, wool are very fractal, and polyester is the opposite. So again, when we come to the same geometry that we saw, we understand that the geometry on the right gives us perfect sharing. And we know that perfect charge compression creates perfect charge distribution. And the picture on the right successfully presents that discipline. And we can understand this subconsciously and get this soothing or relaxing effect. Whereas on the left, we can talk about the opposite effects. This is on the left, we don't have any golden mean ratio. It's more like the multiples of 2 and octave. So that's why we felt much better with the picture on the right. So until here, we learned that a fractal field based on golden ratio breeds charge becomes a bioactive field. Now, I would like to continue with the qualities of the universal energy, but before, let's look at what Nikola Tesla has said. He says, if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. So I suggest we do that, and we think about those issues as frequency and vibration and energy. So now I would like to read an excerpt from Dan Winter's book, Fractal Conjugate, Space and Time, Cause of Negentropy, Gravity and Perception. I think this is on page 41, and the headline is, what is negentropy and self-organization in wave systems? Hopefully, most of us agree now that essentially all of physics is a wave function. The illusion that there is such a thing as a particle has clearly been a distraction. The reason we incorrectly imagined the possibility of a particle was due to the way in which waves of charge gathered in packets because their lengths had to divide evenly into their rotation diameter, what it means to be quantized. In fact, the universe appears to be comprised of a compressible media which stores inertia. I choose to call that universal compressible and fluid-like substance charge. But it is often called ether or chi or 0 point or vacuum energy, or in more universal parlance, the force be with you or grace, etc. What is important is to agree on the qualities of the universal fluid more than the name. It is clearly compressible. It clearly behaves like a fluid. It clearly stores inertia when it rotates. And in certain geometries, like fractal conjugate, it appears to self-organize and become intelligent and alive. Learning to create that geometry among waves is what this book is about. Beautifully said. Now, let's summarize what I just read. This energy substance, its charge, is compressible, behaves like a fluid, stores inertia when it rotates, and in certain geometries, fractal, conjugate, etc., it appears to self-organize and become intelligent and alive. Now, I will talk about how these qualities happen. Let's first start with looking into the physics of waves. A wave in physics is an oscillation accompanied by a transfer of energy that travels through a medium. Imagining, let's say we are throwing a stone to the sea or to a pool and we see this wave effect. Now, I want to focus on two specific forces, which are the centrifugal and the centripetal forces. Now, centrifugal forces are forces who wants to expand, go outwards. And the centripetal forces tend to implode. They would like to come to the center, as we see in specific places in nature. And to understand the science here, I propose to focus on the implosive forces in the universe. So we will more focus on the implosion. So where do we see the implosion? We see them in the black holes, we see them in the whirlpools, and when we observe the forces or the mass try to get in the center here. So when we say implosion, I would like you to visualize in your head a vortex shape trying to get into the center. Now, this is phase conjugate implosive collapse. That there are two sets of waves coming together from opposite directions and creating that implosive field, this negentropic field in the middle. And thank you, this visual also from Dan Winter's website. And now, about the phase conjugation, we see that there are, as I said, two sets of waves coming together like pine cones kissing noses. And we know that in physics, optics physics, when they send two laser beams exact opposing each other, when they meet, there's this spatial self-organizing effect in the middle. So at that point where the waves meet from the exact opposite directions, a very interesting thing happens. At that point, waves tend to reorganize or self-organize themselves, which is the recipe for negentropy, basically. If any wave tries to get out from the order, it is either cancelled or brought back into order. So there is the perfect self-organization, which is the solution to the chaos theory, I guess. And
it would be good to mention. Sorry, it's beautifully said, Tufan, but it would be good to mention that when the two lasers meet, for the magic to happen, called a phase conjugate mirror, they meet in a matrix, a nonlinear material called the material of phase conjugate mirror, the super high dielectric. And so it's actually a matrix molecularly which teaches the lasers to converge in a geometry which is fractal or conjugate. Barium, strontium, titanate being an example. So the stuff of the phase conjugate mirror is part of the magic, and actually the coating on Nostradamus's scrying mirror or John Dee scrying mirror is a clue there. It's the magic is the phase conjugate mirror, and then you have the negentropy.
Perfect. So when we look at the waves, we see the waves as in the vortex form, as said before. And when we look at the intersections here, we should remember the slide that we went over before, which was the exponents of golden ratio. And we said that in specific waveforms, the waves interfere with each other in exact golden ratio proportions. And we see the same effect in such phase conjugate wave fields, as seen in here. If you travel from this point to this point, and from this point to this point, and continue going to the down, you see the golden ratio, or you can measure the golden ratio proportions. And this allows charge compression to transfer to I forgot the wording there, but
scale invariance or non-destructive compression.
yes, that's right. Perfect. So also there is this, as I said, the field effect that's happening in the middle, and we see a dodecahedron shape here. Now I would like to talk about the dodecahedron shape. A dodecahedron is a 12-sided platonic solid. But what is a platonic solid? Platonic solids are specific three-dimensional geometries which were first laid out by Plato in the book Timaeus. And these platonic solids, there's this common quality that they share, which is each one of their side is the same with others. So there's this self-similarity, 100%. So each side is equal to the other side, the corners and the lengths and the angles and everything. When we look at the dodecahedron, each side of the dodecahedron is the same with the other side. Or when we look at the icosahedron, we can see the same principle here. So there are only 5 geometries in the universe which allow that. And those platonic solids have been associated with specific forces, like tetrahedron with fire, cube with earth, octahedron with air, icosahedron with water, dodecahedron with the universe and the spirit. There are also researches which suggest the icosahedron relationship with the universe as well. And we can also see these platonic solids 1,000 years before Plato first wrote about them. Over 400 carved stone balls were found in Scotland, approximately 1,000 years before Plato first wrote about them in Timaeus. And we also see the platonic solid geometries in Kepler's solar system model. We also see them in the world's main energy grid. And we can observe the sacred sites in the intersections of those energy lines. And when we look at the chemist Moon's model of the nucleus, a nesting of 4 of the 5 platonic solids similar to that conceived by Johannes Kepler to describe the solar system. The chemist Moon's work in geometry of atomic nucleus from perfect platonic solids nesting suggests 3D non-destructive collapse, which is gravity making. And when we look at the picture on the right here, we can see that the atoms in the atomic table can be divided into 4 groups based on their electron structures. But the important thing is that when we think about platonic solids, we have to visualize the compressional fields which are starting or happening from the sides towards the center. So the direction is always from the side towards the center. As we saw the vortex geometries, that rotational waves come and meet at the center points here specifically. So when we talk about the cube, we see that there are 6 waves, 6 amounts of waves coming from right, left, front, back, and top and bottom. They are all meeting at the perfect center. And when we analyze the waves here, we can also see the golden ratio proportions as seen in here. This is the same with the dodecahedron, that we have to visualize 12 charged implosive collapse fields. So when we talk about platonic solids, I think that it's very functional to visualize the implosive wave fields, the centripetal wave fields coming to the center to create specific atoms in the platonic solids. So now maybe we have a slightly better, we might have a slightly better understanding of the phase conjugation concept here. Now, if we take this symmetry here from two sides and apply it to 12 sides, as seen in the center dodecahedron here, we can have cold fusion or some other very interesting stuff, which I'll talk about soon. So again, now we can understand better the qualities here. And we said that the qualities of the universal energy has to be compressible, as it's being shown in the platonic solids. And we know that every problem in the social sciences is a problem of compression. So once we can solve the compression problem, then we can also do urban design, alchemy, isotope transition, fusion, perfect computer compression, mindfulness, and bliss. And the universal energy clearly behaves like a fluid. It stores inertia when it rotates, as seen in the vortex form. And the creation happens in the atomic table that we observe as solids. And in certain geometries, like fractal conjugate, it appears to self-organize and become intelligent and alive. Now, I would like to give an example here. Let's take the palladium. Palladium, we know that palladium is the answer to cold fusion. And just like monoatomics and noble gases and gold, palladium, and platinum, all their outer valence electrons are dodeca-icosa shaped symmetries, which allows this fractal field implosive effect. So we saw that in 2003, the Nature magazine drew a dodecahedron in their cover and asked, is this the shape of the universe? And then explained why inside. And another magazine said that, is our universe a fractal? It's both. A dodecahedron is a perfect fractal because it contains the perfect golden mean ratio proportions. It's a great implosive field. And once we start understanding the definitions and the qualities of these fields, then we will see that we will not need the unnecessary concepts like dark matter. This is another depiction of the fractal dodecahedron universe from the geometrygames.org website. And we see these platonic interactions in the concept of perfect nesting or perfect embedding, because we observe that the platonic solids fit each other perfectly, as Kepler first laid out, and then it was seen in the chemist Moon's work. It's like the Matushka babies. So now I'd like to give you a couple of examples in the field of health where the principles are being used. And this is the Terrify device. Dan Winter and Paul Harris developed it. And I also tried this last year in Prague and could see the incredible field effect myself. And with this specific plasma healing device, the same phase conjugate negentropic field effect is created in the middle. And this is now being applied in many countries around the world. You can have much more information from the website terafy.net or other videos that Dan has published. And I would like to continue with the other application, which is Biontology. This is the device that I am applying. So this is a specific biophoton therapy device. So a therapy that corrects the electromagnetic biophotonic signals that are emitted from the cells of every living being. And the device that we work with is called Chiran. You can see it at the back. And this instrument also includes the algorithm of golden ratio inside. And we work with endocrine problems, chronic infections, hypohypertension, allergies, celiac, IBS, Crohn's, arthritis, rheumatism, migraines, and all toxins, Lyme disease, diabetes, and first stage of cancer. We first do measurement, which is called electroacupuncture. With the measurement, we can see which part of the body or which organ or which gland has having specific functional problems, and we can see what kind of problems they are by the measurements, and we can address those problems by applying inverted specific homeopathic remedy frequencies. So and this is a non-invasive application, and I'm currently doing this in Turkey, and this is being done in multiple cities and countries around the world. And one of the main problems that we generally see is hormonal problems with ladies, especially thyroid problems. So I have worked with a lot of women who had thyroid problems and who were taking medications for the rest of their lives, and we were able to stop the medication, and we were able to see the results with the blood tests. We could see the levels of the TSH and the other hormone levels are getting between the accepted levels. And you can find more information on my website, biontology.com/en, as seen here. And I guess these are all that I want to say tonight. You can find my email address, my websites, and my Facebook accounts here. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
That was a beautiful presentation, Tufan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Really beautiful. Well said. Just to mention there, where you were describing the electron shells as platonic nesting, it's so useful. That was from occult chemistry. Yes, even that's a picture. The nuclear models and the electron models were both platonic nests. It's interesting to note that the sp electrons, the s suborbital is toroidal and the pi suborbital is tetracubic, and those are not conjugators. That's right, on the right there, that's right. Whereas the d and f suborbitals, 10-14 electron, 5-7 pair, those are dodecaecosa, and those are conjugators. So that's why when the df suborbital is exposed on the outside, like in palladium and the platinum group metals and the noble gases, you have the potential to be conjugators. So the noble gases in the therapy, for example, are conjugators because the outer electron shells are the df ecosa-dodeca conjugate orbitals. So basically, implosion is dodecaecosa, and implosion is not tetracubic.
That's right. Thank you all.
Let's see if we have other questions here. It was such a beautiful visual set there, Tufan. Really, very nicely put together. Summary is so well done.
Thank you. I usually do this in Turkey. I'm trying to expand this information in Turkey, and it's seeing great interest right now. And this is the first time I'm doing this in English.
Oh, well, you did a great job. So Dan Kaplan says, I had a question about working with sound and how to arrange speakers in a room and what measurements to use. You know, if you place speakers in a hexagram, for example, where the edge length then does equal the radius, and then you play a sine wave whose wavelength is equivalent to the edge of the hexagram, you produce a sonic standing wave in the room, and you can experience that in such a way that if you walk around the room from the node to the antinode, where it's loud, you hear your voice echo back to you like you're in a balloon. And where it's quiet, your voice is sucked away like in a windstorm. So you have the constructive versus destructive interference wave points you can experience in a kind of sonic hologram. And that's, of course, best done in an anechoic chamber. But you can experience the concept of constructive destructive interference by making a sound wave in a hexagram in a room. It's much harder to do that using golden ratio, because basically that creates implosion sound, and that's effectively what the therapy is. And that's a bit trickier. But doing that with binaural beats for brain waves, you can actually create bliss experience. And we're going to offer those binaural beat audios as part of flameinmind.com very soon. Patrick, our programmer, is doing that work. Tufan, I thought it would be nice maybe to speak a little bit about your article about longitudinal waves in DNA in the Turkish magazine.
Yes. So in the magazine called Spirit and Science, Ruh ve Madde, it's in Turkish, I was talking about the collective intentions, the power of intention, basically, and giving some examples from Bill Tiller's tests. And then I was talking about longitudinal waves and some information on biophotons, starting with Fritz Albert Pop's science. And then I was talking about the fractal fields and how energy sharing platforms can be created with the science here. And I was talking about the structure of the DNA, this electric centripetal function of the DNA, where we can observe different golden mean ratio proportions in different levels of the DNA, and the nesting, specific nesting of the DNA, and creating this implosive field effect and arranging the longer frequencies onto shorter frequencies and allowing the rejuvenation, basically.
It's great, and you were speaking about the fact that in Turkish they don't really have a word for longitudinal electromagnetic, and
Yes.
and they use scalar or torsional.
That's right. The scalar wave is quite popular. I mean, when we talk about waves, people generally hear scalar waves in videos of Greg Braden and so on. So I realized that there is no exact translation of the longitudinal wave in Turkish, but maybe we can create one.
You really should, because to see the term scalar wave and even the Russians' term torsional is misleading to a lot of scientists, because a scalar vector in physics has a different meaning, where longitudinal is a far more precise compressional. But the point is that longitudinal waves, of course, go faster than light, will go through just about anything, and when they reconverge at a distance, that they can do remote plasma containment, and they're clearly the mechanism of bioactivity, as Bearden said. So once we realize that sort of golden ratio is all over DNA, and that's how phase conjugation in DNA makes longitudinal EMF, and then we realize Bearden's writing about the power of longitudinal EMF to be bioactive, create healing, and remote action at a distance, suddenly we begin to see how DNA radio really works, and we can optimize that. So I think it's beautiful that you've introduced those ideas in Turkey, and I'm really grateful that you added the references to our work as well. Good work. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, as I said, I would like to thank you for spreading out this information, and I wouldn't be here talking about this if I didn't have learned these things from you. So I would like to thank you.
Well, it's great, and you help me a lot because it's so refreshing to hear these ideas expressed in other people's words and having thought through it yourself, you know. And the key point there really, if I may say, and what actually kind of shocked me about conventional physics, as I said before, is just that, you know, everyone knew that golden ratio was self-similarity, but nobody concluded, therefore, that golden ratio is fractality. And everyone knew that golden ratio is adding and multiplying perfected, but no one stated the obvious, that therefore it's wave compression perfected. And once you realize what wave compression perfecting is, you have it, like we said, the answer to all the problems of science, physics, and spirituality. Perfect compression is the solution to every problem we got. And it is the solution to negentropy and mind. And when Bill Tiller measured that focused attention causes electric fields to compress, right there is the perfect question stated. Why does focused attention cause electric fields to compress? Obviously, you're creating charge implosion. And suddenly all the mysteries are right there in front of you.
Beautiful. Right.
So we thank anybody. If anybody else has more questions for Tufan, let's see. Tyler just said, so our brain waves like delta are separated by golden mean ratio. Yes, Tyler. The idea from, we express that at flameinmind.com, that there's like 4 examples in the literature where people discovered golden mean ratio between the frequency of alpha, beta, delta, and theta cores at the moment of peak perception. And now we're providing elaborate biofeedback techniques to make that teachable, the moment of bliss, quite literally. And the other thing we believe is the right and left hemisphere are 180 degrees out of phase, which is how the pine cones actually kiss noses and how psychokinesis is produced. So we hope to really take that to the next step in flameinmind.com. Did you see another question there? Oh, yeah. Tufan, Terry asked if the Turkish article was available online.
I think not. I mean, I have the pictures of the article, but I think it's not currently published online, but I need to check about that. I'll check it, and I have my articles in many different online platforms, but not in that specific magazine, I guess. But I publish my articles. Let me write it here. I will write you the link here where I publish my articles.
And you know, Tufan, when you send the PDF, maybe you could send a scan or a link. And so we can, when we publish the PDF graphics for Tufan's lecture this evening, along with the video, and we'll put it at FractalU-Dan link from there, FractalU.com. Maybe Tufan will also then share at that time a version of that article that we can publish as well.
Yes, yes. And I just copy and pasted my personal blog link there, and all my original articles are right now being published there. I guess something around 25 or 30 articles. Some of them are about like spirituality, esoteric, and occult stuff. But you can find all of them there, and I hope Google Translation would help for the time being. And I should also look for ways to translate them into English, I guess.
Yes, so it's tufanguven.wordpress.com. Thank you, Tufan. And we had a couple of the questions there. You know, when you know that brainwaves are in golden ratio, what's the relationship to the audio, the binaural beat that creates these effects? And we know that when the right and left hemisphere sound have a frequency difference that's equivalent to alpha beta, and then you modulate that, you can actually create a golden ratio heterodyne in the liquids inside your head. And that can be very powerful, almost to the point of being dangerous, because it actually pushes your aura up through your crown, as they discovered at Monroe Institute. But golden mean ratio heterodynes can be used powerfully and gently in a biofeedback environment if it's done carefully. And that's what we're putting together at flameinmind.com, to the point where we can actually prove we can make golden ratio in the heart rate variability, in the spine liquid pump and the brain waves. So we're doing a lot more with that. You'll see more on that soon in our biofeedback environments as we add to iThrive.com and flameinmind.com. And Joyce is speaking about the Gurdjieff exercise. You actually do this forming twos in the Gurdjieff exercise. The Sufis knew about this, that's right. And Kundalini. Oh yes, Robert Rivard said, in regard to DNA radio, can you elaborate a possible model, external apparatus? Well, you know, it's called mitogenic radiation, how, you know, DNA communicates. And of course, we know a tree hundreds of miles away can know when a one at a distance has gotten a disease and pick up the antibodies. And we now know how that works. It's capacitive coupling at a distance, like, for example, the Princeton noosphere Josephson junction transducer works to pick up collective unconscious. It's capacitive coupling that is traveling as a longitudinal wave and therefore superluminal and can go through about anything. And that begins to help us understand the spiritual ideas about collective unconscious and the voice of God. It helps us understand why, you know, ancestral voices are available only in particular kinds of places, namely the fractal field kind of places. So Tufan, I guess we had fun tonight. Any other final thoughts?
Well, I would like to ask you a question that I was wondering whether you have any plans of making the iThrive application available on Androids.
Yes, iThrive.com, ITHRVE.com, has 3 apps now. The main iThrive app, which is also for sacrocranial work, and iThrive Chakras, which shows the chakras lighting up, and then an iThrive Stress Management for corporate stress management. And we're seriously looking at developing an Android version. You know, of course, that's very expensive because Android is hardware fractionation and security problems. But we get lots of requests, so we're working on that. And also the flameinmind.com, which is now using the Muse transducer. So we will get there someday, but for now we started with the iOS, the iPhone, iPad, because of course I'm an Apple nut, so I have to confess.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, unless there's any more questions, anybody for final thoughts? We really thank you, Tufan. You know, Tufan, I'd like to invite you here to South France. We're planning a cool event in late July, and I'd like you to meet some friends. And I'd like to also offer to send you the sensors for the iThrive, and I love working with you. I appreciate it, Tufan.
Yeah, I would be delighted to join you guys. That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, we're having a party in South France later in July. We'll get more news out to you. So we thank you, Tufan. Thanks for everybody that came, Alan and Teresa. It's been wonderful. And this video will become, you know, the last video of the course we made had 1,000 views in the first day or two. So this video will go out to the world in just a couple days. We'll make it public at FractalU.com just as soon as it comes out. And Tufan's going to send me the slideshow that goes with it. So you can use this for your teaching in the future, Tufan. And more to come on this. The world media awaits us. Let's make it a shareable wave. All good.
Perfect.
Blessings. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye. I'm going to turn off the recording now. Thanks, guys. See you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.